Right, okay, so I imagine that a Merseyside audience might be feeling a bit down at the moment. You know, we're being Brexited against our will. We've still got a Conservative government, neither of which many of us voted for. But I'm here to cheer you up a little bit because, you know, we've got a new Prime Minister, and yes, she is a Conservative, but I think she's got some sensible ideas. Now, when she was campaigning for Remain, she said, it's not the EU we want to leave, it's the European Convention on Human Rights. You know what? And I think that's probably really sensible because when you actually look at it, a lot of the reasons that people voted leave in the first place, like this chap, were to do with illegal immigrants, terrorists, basically bad people that we didn't want here and wanted to get rid of. And the thing is, it's not really the EU that's a problem there, it's human rights. For example, there was a time that she told us about that illegal immigrant who got to stay in the UK because of his human rights, because he had a pet cat. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, obviously, if you actually read the judgment, it turns out he had a long-term human partner. The government had actually misread their own rules, and the cat had absolutely nothing to do with it, probably why he's looking so upset. But, you know, Theresa May told us it was because of the cat, and that's absolutely ridiculous. You can't let someone stay because of a cat. And then, of course, there's lots of other people. I mean, there's this guy, Abu Qatada. It took 12 years to deport this guy for hate preaching to children, just because we're not allowed to send people places where they might get tortured. It's just completely unfair. I mean, he did eventually get sent there, but I mean, that's not the point, okay? And then there's this guy who's, I mean, he's got a hook for a hand. He's clearly a really, really bad guy. And again, it took a while to get him deported to America. Just because of his human rights. It's Abu Hamza, by the way. He's now serving life without parole in America. And, I mean, human rights means we have to treat prisoners like human beings. The European Convention said that we had to give them the vote. I mean, and why on earth would you want to, with a prison population, almost all of whom will be released at some point, why would you want to engender in them a sense of civic responsibility? That makes no sense. And, I mean, it was so bad that it made David Cameron feel physically ill, if you remember. He said that at the time when the judgment came in. And I imagine he's probably feeling a little bit more unwell these days, but still, prisoners are clearly not human beings. And then there's Turkey. So a lot of people who voted to leave, a big reason was they didn't want Turkey joining the EU, or they didn't want to be part of an EU that Turkey was going to join because of all these people that are going to come in, these scary immigrant people. But I think actually we should take more of a lead from Turkey because, you know, there is nothing more annoying when you are trying to brutally crush an attempted coup than having to deal with people's basic human rights. And that's why they've recently derogated from the European Convention so that they can arrest thousands and thousands of people and maybe execute them. It's not very good. And this is the thing, we only ever hear about human rights when it's these people, terrorists, criminals, prisoners, illegal immigrants. We never ever hear about our human rights. We only ever hear about cases like the case coming up, the lady Joanna Deheny. She killed 3 people. She is serving a whole life term in prison at the moment, and she took a case to the European Court of Human Rights because she was feeling a bit sad because she was all alone in prison. And I mean, she lost that case, and the government won almost all of the cases, and there was no public funding that went into that. But still, I mean, it's completely ridiculous. We only ever hear about her rights. I mean, when we're going about our lawful leisure activities, like coming to Leaf, having a drink, listening to a crazy person rant about human rights for 5 minutes, going shopping, going to the cinema, things like that, you know, even stuff like, I don't know, going to football matches. My basic human rights are never breached by public bodies, like, say, for example, my Article 2 right to life is never breached by public bodies when I go to things like that. Is it? Actually, the recent inquest decision that happened in April, where there was an unlawful killing decision which overturned 27 years of lies and cover-up about what happened at Hillsborough. Primarily, that was as a result of the families and their tireless efforts to get that narrative overturned over all of that time. But they wouldn't have been able to get where we are today if it weren't for Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The reason being that once it came into law in 2004, it meant that inquest had to be what's known as Article 2 compliant, and that meant that they had to cover more broadly the circumstances as to what had caused the death rather than just the mechanics of how someone had died. And therefore, the recent inquest could look at all of the circumstances, all of the cover-up, all of the ridiculousness from the police and other public bodies, and finally get the justice that the 96 deserved, and hopefully some more prosecutions along the way. And so, that's actually why human rights are actually perhaps a good idea. And if you hear any sort of dodgy arguments about it moving forward, as we go forward with Theresa May's Prime Ministership, and perhaps people start to talk about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, I'd ask that you remember Hillsborough and remember that human rights are actually for all of us. Thank you.